It was a quiet Saturday night in Santa Monica when a strange 911 call came in. Panicked, cut off mid-sentence. Just a few minutes later, a neighbor heard loud noises from a nearby bungalow, like furniture being knocked over. But no one checked. No one knew what was really happening. The next day, police showed up to the small apartment. What they found inside was shocking. A young woman, full of dreams, was lying lifeless in her bedroom. The gas had been left on. A candle was still burning. But nothing looked forced or broken. So who had been there? What really happened that night? As investigators searched for answers, they uncovered a story filled with money, jealousy, and secrets. One that would leave everyone wondering if justice was ever truly served. Juliana Redding was born on October the 25th, 1986, in Dallas, Texas, into a close-knit Catholic family. Raised alongside her younger brother Patrick by their devoted parents, Patricia and Greg Redding, Juliana grew up surrounded by strong values and a deep connection to her faith. From a young age, she stood out, not only for her remarkable beauty, but for her joyful nature and the magnetic charm that drew people to her. Her early childhood was marked by warmth, laughter, and ambition. Even as a little girl, Juliana seemed at ease in adult settings, often accompanying her grandmother to board meetings and delighting in the formal atmosphere. She adored her dolls, loved working with children, and had an especially close bond with her brother. Juliana's upbringing was filled with activities that shaped her vibrant spirit. At South Point Catholic High School, she excelled academically and athletically, participating in track, soccer, theater, and golf, where she helped lead the school team to a state title. She was a member of the recycling club, served on the student council, and assisted at her church as a preschool teacher. Her teachers described her as kind, respectful, and a natural leader. She had dreams of becoming both an entrepreneur and an actress, blending her intellectual ambition with her artistic flair. By 2005, she had already performed with the Tucson Symphony and landed a role in an independent film titled Katiti, filmed in Atlanta. In 2006, eager to chase her Hollywood dreams, Juliana moved to California. She settled in a cozy, bungalow-style apartment on Centinela Avenue in Santa Monica, just minutes from the glamour of Sunset Boulevard in Beverly Hills. While she studied communications at Santa Monica College, she worked as a hostess in upscale restaurants and picked up part-time jobs as a bartender and waitress, always keeping her eyes on opportunities in acting and modeling. With her chestnut hair and captivating looks, Juliana began to draw attention in the entertainment industry. In early 2008, she was reportedly in talks to appear in a feature for Maxim magazine, an opportunity that could have launched her into wider recognition, but her dreams were cut short in the most devastating way. On the night of March 15, 2008, Juliana made a call to emergency services around 10 p.m., but the line abruptly went dead. A neighbor later reported hearing the sounds of furniture being knocked over shortly before the call. No one realized at the time that Juliana may have been fighting for her life. The next day, her mother, unable to reach her by phone, became increasingly alarmed. Patricia contacted the Santa Monica Police Department and requested a welfare check. Officer Scott Matt Goen was among the first to arrive at the apartment. He heard Juliana's dog barking from inside, but there was no answer at the door. Then he noticed a disturbing detail: the distinct smell of gas. The fire department was called, and officers forced entry into the apartment. Inside, they discovered an extinguished pilot light on the stove, a burner open, and a candle still flickering, signs that the apartment had been filled with gas for hours, posing a grave risk of explosion. What they found next was even more horrifying. From the kitchen, Officer Gowan could see into the bedroom. Juliana lay lifeless on the bed. Her body showed signs of having been deceased for several hours: purple discoloration along her lower limbs, a grim indicator of post-mortem lividity. The scene suggested a violent struggle. Investigators documented signs of a fight and collected a wide array of DNA samples, from door handles, kitchenware, and even Juliana's shirt. One of the most critical samples came from beneath her fingernails. Initially, speculation in the media suggested a blunt force trauma as the cause of death, but the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office later issued a correction. The cause of death would remain sealed, though the manner of death was confirmed to be homicide. In a chilling twist, forensic evidence indicated that the DNA beneath her fingernails matched Juliana herself, suggesting she had clawed at her own neck in a desperate attempt to loosen the grip of her attacker, likely during an attempt to strangle her. Law enforcement remained tight-lipped about the investigation, guarding details closely in order to preserve the integrity of the case. The public, meanwhile, was left stunned by the loss of a bright, beautiful young woman whose life had seemed full of promise and purpose. As forensic teams combed through the violent crime scene at Juliana Redding's Santa Monica apartment and lab technicians analyzed the biological evidence, another part of the investigation was quietly unfolding. Detectives were reaching out to friends and family members, hoping personal insights could unlock the mystery behind her shocking death. One name quickly surfaced: John Gilmore. According to Juliana's father, Greg Redding, this was the man she had dated on and off for the past 2 years, a relationship he had never approved of. Greg told investigators that John had a temper and a history of aggressive behavior. On one occasion, he said, John kicked in Juliana's car door. On another, he reportedly forced his way into her home after an argument. Given that many violent crimes against women are committed by someone close to the victim, the police wasted no time speaking with Gilmore. He admitted that the relationship had been turbulent and confirmed they'd argued on the night of March 15th, the same night Juliana was murdered. But he insisted it had only been a phone fight after Juliana got upset about his decision to go out with friends. According to him, she hung up on him, then went out with a friend of her own. He claimed to have attended a house party several miles away and exchanged text messages with Juliana until 10 p.m., when her replies suddenly stopped. Gilmore stated that he went to Juliana's bungalow the next morning but left after getting no response. Through the security gate, he claimed to see a candle flickering inside. Though suspicion initially focused on him, Gilmore was soon cleared. Surveillance footage confirmed his presence at a store and 2 other locations that night. Several witnesses also placed him at a party during the critical time frame between 9:45 and 10:15 p.m. Moreover, forensic investigators had discovered something that shifted the focus entirely. The DNA found at the crime scene belonged to a woman. With this revelation, investigators began exploring whether someone close to Juliana might have been jealous or harbored resentment. Female acquaintances were questioned and DNA samples collected, but none matched. In the meantime, Juliana's family held a funeral mass on March 28th at the St. Thomas the Apostle Church in Tucson. Friends, relatives, and former classmates gathered to mourn a young woman who had lived her short life with purpose and joy. Those who knew her spoke not just of her beauty, but of her kindness, ambition, and spirited nature. Although it seemed the case was stalling, detectives were quietly delving deeper into Juliana's personal and professional connections. And that's when another key figure emerged. Dr. Munir Uwaida, a wealthy Lebanese-born surgeon nearly 20 years her senior. Munir had grown up in Beirut, the son of a prominent doctor, and by the time he met Juliana in 2007, he was living a lavish lifestyle in Los Angeles. The two met while Juliana was working as a hostess in a high-end restaurant. Struck by her presence, Munir offered her a job as an assistant at his medical clinic. She accepted, and soon their relationship became more than professional. Juliana moved into one of Munir's homes in Beverly Hills and began driving a white Range Rover he gave her. He showered her with luxury, watches, designer clothes, vacations, and even once offered to buy her a Lamborghini for her 21st birthday. Friends observed that Munir was infatuated, bordering on obsessed. He even discussed marriage. Munir also sought a professional alliance with Juliana's father, Greg, who was a pharmacist. He proposed launching a pharmaceutical business called Golden State Pharmaceuticals, with Greg as its director. But Juliana, still young and pursuing her own dreams in acting and school, eventually felt overwhelmed. She ended the relationship and moved into the Santa Monica bungalow, a space she could afford only with help from her father. Although the romance had ended, contact between Juliana and Munir did not. In fact, she had recently gone on a birthday trip to Las Vegas with him and some friends. However, the celebratory mood didn't last. Around that time, Greg informed Juliana that he had discovered something troubling. Munir was married and had 3 children in Lebanon. Feeling betrayed, Juliana broke off all contact. Despite personal tensions, the business negotiations between Munir and Greg continued until March 2008. But shortly before Juliana's death, Greg decided to pull out of the deal. His lawyers had concerns about the legality and structure of the company and sent a letter formally ending their involvement. According to their statement, the compensation Munir offered was enticing, but not worth the professional and ethical risks. Interestingly, Munir's legal team later claimed that it was he who ended the negotiations. Just days after those negotiations fell apart, Juliana was found dead. Naturally, investigators considered whether there could be a link between the failed business deal and the murder. But Munir had a strong alibi. He was out of the country at the time of Juliana's death. And crucially, the DNA found at the scene still pointed to a woman, not a man. Despite being cleared as a direct suspect in Juliana Redding's murder, Dr. Munir Uwaida remained on investigators' radar. The police strongly suspected that someone in his inner circle may have been involved in the young woman's death. They began a focused investigation into the women who worked closely with him, and one name quickly rose to the top: Kelly Sue Park. At 44 years old, Kelly was a real estate agent and a personal assistant to Munir in various business ventures. What drew the detectives' attention was a troubling financial pattern. From June 2008 onward, Kelly received over $1 million from Munir in a span of just 18 months. Most notably, she had received a $250,000 payment only 3 weeks before Juliana's murder, an amount that raised red flags. Police surveillance of Kelly intensified. In one operation, investigators collected a discarded cigarette she smoked. DNA tests confirmed a chilling match. Her genetic material was found at the crime scene. On June 17, 2010, more than 2 years after Juliana's death, authorities moved in. Kelly and her partner Ronnie were arrested without incident in California. Although public records listed them as residents of Thousand Oaks, Kelly was transported to Los Angeles, where she appeared in court on June 21st. Prosecutors charged her with the 2008 murder of Juliana Redding, alleging she had entered Juliana's Santa Monica apartment on the night of March 15th and physically assaulted her, resulting in death. Her bail was set at $1 million, and if convicted, she faced 25 years to life in prison. Ronnie, though taken into custody, was released without charges. The media, long frustrated by the secrecy surrounding the case, soon uncovered another startling development. Just 2 days after Kelly's arrest, Dr. Munir Uweda disappeared from Los Angeles. He was believed to have fled to Beirut, though at that point he faced no formal charges related to Juliana's death. In October 2010, a secret grand jury hearing was held over the course of 3 days to assess the evidence against Kelly. For nearly 2 years, the case had been shielded in confidentiality, but in December, the Los Angeles Times obtained and published a transcript of the grand jury proceedings, revealing critical details for the first time. Testimonies included statements from detectives, forensic specialists, and the medical examiner. They described the violent struggle inside Juliana's apartment and how the killer attempted to destroy the evidence. According to prosecutors, the gas left on and the candle still burning in the living room were part of a deliberate plan to ignite an explosion, an attempt to obliterate any trace of the crime. The forensic pathologist described the trauma inflicted on Juliana. Her body was covered in bruises and abrasions. Capillaries in her eyes had burst, a classic sign of strangulation, and the bones in her neck were crushed. Scratch marks under her chin were determined to be self-inflicted, made as she desperately tried to tear her attacker's hands from her throat. The DNA evidence was compelling. Analysts testified that Kelly's DNA was found on Juliana's skin, clothing, cell phone, a stove knob, and even a blood droplet on a dish. Her fingerprints were also discovered on various surfaces in the apartment. Adding another layer to the narrative was the discovery of saliva belonging to actor Brian Van Holt on Juliana's body. He was granted immunity in exchange for his testimony and admitted to having an intimate relationship with Juliana. He told the grand jury that they had been together the night before her death. Despite the intimate link, there was no evidence implicating him in her murder. Prosecutors believed that Kelly and Juliana had never met, but what bound them was Dr. Munir. According to the theory presented, Kelly was acting as Munir's enforcer, sent to intimidate Juliana or pressure her father, Greg Redding, into moving forward with a pharmaceutical business deal that had fallen apart just days earlier. Kelly, nearly 6 feet tall and physically imposing, was described by the prosecution as Munir's female James Bond. The six-figure payment she received shortly before the attack and another large payment made to her relatives just prior to her arrest seemed too well timed to be dismissed as coincidence. While the grand jury was presented with a compelling theory, some aspects remained unanswered, most notably how detectives had connected Kelly to the case after such a long period and what truly motivated the violent escalation that led to Juliana Redding's murder. As the trial against Kelly Sue Park gained national attention, her defense attorney addressed the court with a simple explanation for the staggering sums of money she had received from Dr. Munir Uweda. According to him, Kelly was merely a personal real estate agent for the wealthy surgeon, and nothing more, but prosecutors weren't convinced. To them, Munir, the former lover of Juliana Redding, had become the shadowy figure looming behind the entire case. The prosecutor noted that Munir fled the United States the very day Kelly was arrested. Still, without direct evidence tying him to the murder, no communications, no financial trail ordering violence, no physical presence, prosecutors were forced to focus solely on Kelly and the overwhelming DNA evidence found throughout the crime scene. The prosecutor also told the grand jury that Kelly's DNA was found on nearly every surface inside Juliana's Santa Monica bungalow, on her body, clothes, phone, stove knob, even in a droplet of blood on a dish. Convinced that the physical evidence was irrefutable, the grand jury agreed. There was enough to proceed to trial. At the trial, which finally took place in 2013, jurors once again heard a reconstruction of the final, violent moments of Juliana Redding's life. Police, forensic experts, and pathologists described a brutal struggle, a failed attempt to trigger an explosion via gas and a lit candle, and an assault so violent it crushed the young woman's neck bones. The prosecution presented a chilling narrative, supported by DNA, fingerprint, and forensic evidence. They argued that Kelly had been sent by Munir to intimidate Juliana and possibly her father, Greg Redding, into resuming a failed pharmaceutical deal. But their case, though supported by science, had one fatal flaw. It lacked a clear motive and a complete narrative. Why would a woman with no history of violence commit such a gruesome crime? After more than a week of deliberations, the jury returned with its verdict in June 2013. Kelly Sue Park was found not guilty of the murder of Juliana Redding. The courtroom exploded in emotion. Kelly, now 47, broke into tears as the verdict was read. Her supporters wept with relief. But behind her, Juliana's friends and family sobbed in anger and disbelief. Some shouted at Kelly to go to hell and accused the jury of turning justice into a farce. The jurors left the building through a back entrance, avoiding the press. They offered no public explanation for their decision. Kelly's attorney later stated that the prosecution had relied too heavily on DNA evidence, failing to establish why or how Kelly would be motivated to kill. He emphasized that DNA only tells you that someone's cells were present. It doesn't tell you why or how they got there. According to him, the prosecution never delivered a logical story that made sense to the jury. Juliana's parents released a written statement of their own, saying the evidence against Kelly was overwhelming and that their daughter had died at the intersection of a failed romance and a shady business deal. But the story of Kelly Sue Park didn't end in that courtroom. Just over 2 years after her acquittal, in August 2015, Park was arrested again, this time along with 12 others, all linked to the criminal empire of Dr. Munir Uwaida. The charges included conspiracy, insurance fraud, aggravated assault, and conducting unauthorized surgeries that defrauded insurance companies of $150 million. Kelly pled not guilty, but the allegations were disturbing. Prosecutors claimed that Munir, who had by then lost his California medical license, had allowed unqualified assistants to perform surgeries, misleading at least 21 patients into believing he was the one operating. Kelly was released on $1.5 million bail while the case developed. Though no new charges directly tied her to Juliana's death, the fraud case overlapped significantly with allegations from the murder trial, namely, that Munir and Kelly had built a multi-layered fraudulent medical empire together. Over the next 5 years, the fraud case moved slowly through the legal system, filled with legal challenges, dropped charges, and reinstated accusations. Charges included aggravated violence, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. But in a twist no one expected, in May 2020, the Los Angeles Superior Court ordered that all charges against Kelly and several others be dismissed. The reason was sealed, and the presiding judge, who had been overseeing the case since 2017, did not publicly explain his decision. For Juliana Redding's family, it was another bitter blow. More than a decade after her death, no one had been held accountable. Her mother, Patricia, an artist who had passed her creativity on to Juliana, found solace in painting. Through art, she tried to reconnect with her daughter's spirit, keeping her memory alive in colors and brushstrokes. Though justice in the legal sense remained elusive, the story of Juliana Redding continues to echo as a chilling example of how ambition, obsession, and money can converge in the darkest of ways, and how sometimes the truth is never enough to convict. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.